When a cowboy meets a gentle stranger at the ranch, a beautiful Western love story. Cowboy Secrets. The first thing Eli Calloway ever said to Noah Reed was not hello. It was not welcome to the ranch or good to have you here or any of the polite practice things his mother had spent 19 years trying to teach him. No, the first thing Eli Calloway said, hands gripping the fence post, jaw tight, eyes sharp as a hawk cutting through a summer sky, was this: "You're going to get yourself killed wearing those boots." And Noah Reed, standing there in the middle of a West Texas rainstorm with a duffel bag over one shoulder, mud already climbing the sides of his brand new leather city shoes, looked up at Eli with those dark, rain-wet eyes and said, without missing a single beat, "Well, good morning to you too." That was the beginning. That was the very first crack in the wall. The Callaway Ranch sat on 460 acres of red dirt Texas land, and it had belonged to the Callaway family for 3 generations. Eli's grandfather had built the main house with his own hands, log by log, board by board, before the highway even reached that part of the county. His father had expanded it. Added the east pasture, the second barn, the horse stables that now held 11 horses, beautiful, temperamental creatures that Eli understood far better than he understood most people. Eli was 22 years old, and he had lived on that ranch every single day of his life. He knew every fence post, every ridge of rock, every trail that wound through the cedar and mesquite. He knew which sections of the pasture flooded in spring and which horses spooked at the sound of thunder, and exactly how many minutes of golden light you got on the west side of the ridge just before the sun dropped below the hill. He knew these things the way other people know their own heartbeat, without thinking, without effort, the way you just know. What Eli did not know, what he had never really needed to know, was how to be around someone who made him feel like the ground beneath his boots was not quite as solid as it had always been. He was about to learn. The internship program had been his mother's idea. Margaret Calloway was a practical woman with soft eyes and an iron will, and she had decided 2 summers ago that the ranch needed young blood, fresh hands, people who could learn the work and maybe bring some new energy to a place that had started to feel, in her words, a little too quiet. Her husband, Raymond, had grumbled about it the way he grumbled about most things, not with real conviction, just with the low, habitual rumble of a man who had long ago learned that his wife was usually right. So the Callaway Ranch had officially partnered with an agricultural program out of Austin, and every summer since, they took on 1 or 2 interns. Young adults looking to learn about ranch life, sustainable farming, land management. It was legitimate, documented, professional. Eli had tolerated the first 2 interns without much trouble. One had quit after 3 weeks. The other had been perfectly fine, quiet, competent, and had left at the end of August without making any particular impression on anyone. Eli had expected more of the same. He had not expected Noah Reed. The truck that brought Noah from the bus station in town was driven by Miguel, one of the full-time ranch hands, and it rolled through the gate on a Thursday evening in early June with a sky that had been threatening rain since noon. Eli was at the fence near the main drive when it came in, restringing a section of wire that the cattle had pushed through that morning. He heard the truck. He didn't look up. He heard the door open. He heard boots hit gravel. He heard Miguel say something low and friendly in that warm way Miguel had with people. Then he heard the rain start, not a gentle beginning, but the sudden, full-volume West Texas kind that hits you like someone knocked over a bucket from the sky. He looked up then, and there was Noah Reed. Standing in the rain, not running, not cursing, not doing any of the things a sensible person does when they are suddenly and completely soaked. Just standing there with his face tilted up slightly like he was, and this was the part Eli's mind kept catching on when he replayed it later, like he was actually enjoying it. Like a man who had been very dry for a very long time had just discovered water. He was not what Eli had expected. He was leaner than the other interns, with dark hair plastered flat against his forehead in the rain, and a quality of stillness about him that seemed at odds with the storm happening all around him. He wore dark jeans, a light jacket that was completely useless in rain, and Eli's eye went straight to it, a pair of clean, polished, unmistakably brand new dress shoes that were already being destroyed by the red Texas mud. That was when Eli said it. "You're going to get yourself killed wearing those boots." Noah looked at him, and Eli, who was not generally a man who noticed the exact shade of another person's eyes, noticed that Noah Reed's eyes were a very particular kind of dark brown, the kind that didn't just absorb light but seemed to hold it, warm it, give it back in a different form. "Well, good morning to you too," Noah said. "It's 6 in the evening," Eli said. "And already off to a wonderful start," Noah replied, and something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, the promise of one. Eli turned back to his fence post. He was not entirely sure why his hands felt slightly less steady than they had 30 seconds ago. Dinner that first night was around the big table in the main house kitchen, which was where all meals on the Calloway Ranch happened. Margaret had made her brisket, which was a statement of welcome whether she admitted it or not, and Raymond sat at the head of the table doing his slow, deliberate assessment of the new arrival while pretending to focus entirely on his food. Miguel was there, and Denny, the older hand who had been on the ranch for 12 years and who communicated primarily through eyebrow movements, and Eli, who sat at his usual place and told himself he was not paying particular attention to the new person. Noah ate with the careful appreciation of someone who was genuinely hungry and genuinely grateful, which Margaret clocked immediately and approved of without saying a word. He answered Raymond's questions, "Where are you from? What's your program? What do you know about cattle work?" with a directness that neither oversold nor undersold himself. He was from Austin. His program was agricultural science with a land management focus. He knew some things about cattle, not a lot, and he was here to learn more. His grandfather had been a rancher in New Mexico. He had visited once as a child and had never quite gotten the place out of his head. "Why not?" Raymond asked, which was the most words Raymond had offered to any intern in 2 summers. Noah thought about that for a moment. Actually thought about it, which was not something most people did when Raymond asked a question. They usually just filled the silence with noise. "Because it was the first place I ever felt like the quiet made sense," Noah said. Raymond looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once and went back to his brisket. Eli watched this exchange from across the table. He did not say anything, but he turned the words over in his mind the way you turn a smooth stone over in your hand, not examining it exactly, just feeling the weight of it. The first place the quiet made sense. His room was in the bunkhouse, which sat about 60 yards from the main house between the first barn and the equipment shed. It had 2 beds, a bathroom, a window facing east, and a small wooden dresser that had been there since before Eli was born. The first intern had hung a poster on the wall and taken it with him when he left. The second intern had brought a speaker that played soft music in the evenings, which Eli had after 2 weeks stopped noticing and started expecting. Noah brought a sketchbook. Eli noticed it because it was the last thing Noah pulled from his duffel that first night, and he set it on the dresser beside his phone with the same careful deliberateness you might use setting down something that mattered. It was a thick, cloth-bound book, worn at the corners, clearly not new. Eli didn't ask about it. He lay on his side of the bunkhouse listening to the rain on the tin roof, a sound he had known his entire life, a sound that usually put him to sleep within minutes and found himself oddly, stubbornly awake. The first place the quiet made sense. He closed his eyes. Outside, the rain came down steady and full, the way it did in early June, and the horses in the near stable shifted and settled, and somewhere in the dark the cattle were moving slowly through the pasture. And everything was exactly as it had always been. Eli told himself he would sleep in a minute. He did not sleep for a long time. Eli was up before dawn, he always was. There is a particular quality to a West Texas morning before the sun arrives, a kind of held breath, the sky shifting from deep black to a blue so dark it almost isn't blue yet, the air carrying a coolness that the day will spend the next 10 hours burning away. Eli stood on the porch of the bunkhouse with his coffee and watched that sky the way he watched it every morning, the way his father had watched it before him, the way there is something in certain people that needs to witness the exact moment the world decides to start again. He heard the bunkhouse door open behind him. He did not turn around. He had expected to have another hour of this for himself. He was not angry, it wasn't that, but there was something involuntary in the way his shoulders adjusted, the way a person's body makes small corrections when their solitude is interrupted. "Is it always this cold in the morning?" Noah's voice was quiet, not a whisper exactly, but the voice of someone who understood instinctively that this was not a loud kind of moment. "It's 62 degrees, Eli said. "Where I'm from that's cold. Where you're from, people wear city shoes to a cattle ranch." He heard something, not quite a laugh, lighter than that, from behind him. Then he heard the soft sound of the door opening again, then the soft compression of boots on the porch boards, and Noah was standing beside him. Close enough that Eli was aware of him the way you are aware of something warm when the air around it is cool. He stared forward at the sky and did not look sideways. Noah had changed out of the destroyed dress shoes. He was wearing actual work boots now, older ones, scuffed and used, nothing like the shoes from last night. Eli registered this without comment. They stood in the quiet for a minute, maybe two. The sky went on its slow, blue journey toward morning. One of the horses in the near stable made a low, deep sound, not distress, just presence, just the announcement of waking. A mockingbird started somewhere in the cedar, cycling through its catalog of stolen songs. "That's beautiful," Noah said quietly, not to Eli specifically, just to the air. Eli did not respond, but the tension in his shoulders, the involuntary tightening that had happened when the door opened, had, somewhere in the last 2 minutes, quietly let go. He noticed that too. The first week on a working ranch is the hardest. Not physically, though the physical part is real. The early hours, the constant motion, the muscle soreness that accumulates through the day and arrives fully formed sometime around 9 in the evening. The hardest part is the learning curve of understanding that everything here has a reason, and that the reason is not always obvious, and that asking too many questions in a row can make you look lost even when the questions are good ones. Noah asked good questions. Eli noticed this because he was the one assigned to show Noah the basics, his father's request, delivered over breakfast on that second morning in the flat, factual tone Raymond used for all requests that were actually directives. Walk him through the morning routine, the animals, the water, the fence checks, give him a week of the basics before we put him on anything bigger. Eli had nodded and said nothing and had gone to find Noah at the water trough behind the first barn, where Noah was standing with his sleeves already rolled up, studying the trough's float mechanism with the focused expression of someone who actually wanted to understand how something worked. "The float sticks if the temperature drops below 50, Eli said, coming up beside him. Noah looked up. "What do you do when it sticks?" "There's a wood handle hanging on the post. You tap it twice on the side right below the valve, not hard, twice." "Why does that work?" "Because the metal expands just enough when the water shifts, creates a little pressure release." Noah looked at the mechanism, then back at Eli. "How did you figure that out?" "My dad figured it out, I watched him." Noah nodded slowly. "How old were you?" Eli thought about it. 7, maybe 8. "And you've just known it since then?" "Yeah." Noah was quiet for a moment and then he said with something genuine and a little wistful in his voice, "That's an incredible thing, to have someone to watch." Eli didn't know how to respond to that. So he pointed to the east pasture fence and said they needed to walk the south line before the heat came up, and Noah fell into step beside him, and they did not speak again for several minutes, and Eli spent those minutes thinking about what Noah had said and the particular quality of the wistfulness in his voice when he said it. By the end of the first week, Eli had revised his initial assessment of Noah Reed several times. His first assessment had been, city person, probably soft, probably won't last 3 weeks. The destroyed dress shoes had contributed to this. The light jacket in a thunderstorm had contributed to this. The overall quality of not belonging here had contributed to this. His revised assessment by Friday evening was more complicated. Noah was not soft. He was lean, yes, and he moved through hard physical work with less efficiency than someone raised to it, but he did not stop. He did not complain. When Eli showed him something once, he did not need to be shown again. When he made a mistake, and there were several in that first week, each one the honest kind that comes from not yet knowing rather than not paying attention, he acknowledged it directly and without drama and asked specifically what he had done wrong so he could do it differently. He was also, Eli had reluctantly noticed, good with the horses. This was not a small thing on the Callaway ranch. The horses were the measure of something. Eli's father had always believed this, that horses read people the way people read words, instinctively and accurately, and that you could learn more about someone from how a horse received them than from anything they said. Most new hands in that first week got a polite distance from the animals, a considered space that was not rejection but was not warmth either. Juniper was the test. She was a 7-year-old bay mare with dark, intelligent eyes and a memory like a grudge, and she had taken a strong dislike to the second intern that had lasted the entire summer. She had taken an even stronger dislike to a ranch visitor the previous spring, and had communicated this opinion loudly and physically enough that the visitor had not returned. On the third day, Eli had been in the stable doing the evening feed when Noah had come in, and Juniper had turned her head toward the newcomer with that measuring assessment that Eli knew well. He had waited for the flattened ears, the shift backward, the nose pointed away that was her version of a firm no. Juniper had stretched her nose forward and sniffed Noah's hand. Then she had pressed her forehead gently against his shoulder. Eli had stared at this for a moment longer than he intended. "What's her name?" Noah had asked softly, one hand coming up to rest lightly on the side of her neck. "Juniper," Eli said. "She's incredible. She doesn't usually like strangers." Noah looked at Eli then over the mare's neck. "I'm glad she made an exception." Eli had looked away first. He had not entirely understood why. June settled into its full weight, the kind of heat that arrives on the land like a presence, like something with intention, pressing down on the red earth and the cedar and the backs of people working in it from before breakfast until the sun finally dropped below the ridge. Eli and Noah worked the same hours. This was simply the structure of the ranch. The animals did not accommodate different schedules, and the work distributed itself according to who was available and capable. By the end of the second week, it had become natural for them to work in proximity, the way that happens when two people share the rhythm of the same demanding physical space, and have reached the silent agreement that efficiency matters more than distance. They worked fence lines together in the mornings. They fed and watered the horses in the afternoons. They moved cattle twice that week between pastures, which required the kind of coordinated, quiet communication that Eli normally did alone or with Miguel, and he had been prepared to carry most of it himself with Noah just learning the shapes of the work. But Noah paid attention. Noah read the cattle with more instinct than his limited experience should have given him, and when Eli moved left to catch a drift before it became a problem, he found Noah had already moved right to cut it from the other side, and the herd moved cleanly and without trouble. And Eli had looked across the pasture at Noah, and Noah had looked back, and there was a moment, brief, real, of something that was not quite surprise and not quite satisfaction but lived in the vicinity of both. That evening, sitting on the tailgate of the old work truck at the edge of the north pasture while the horses cooled down in the evening air, Miguel had looked at both of them and said in his quiet, amused way, "That was good work today." He had said it to both of them, like it was one thing. Eli had noted that too. The sketchbook came out on a Sunday. Sundays on the Callaway Ranch had a different texture than other days, not easy exactly, because ranches don't observe weekends in any strict sense but lighter. The big work paused. Animals were fed and tended, but the heavier labor waited for Monday. It was the day Margaret made something elaborate for lunch and Raymond sat on the porch with the county paper and Denny slept, until 8 o'clock like it was the most radical act of rebellion available to him. Eli usually spent Sunday mornings doing the small maintenance things that didn't get done during the week: oil in the tractor, hinges that needed attention, the endless small repairs that a working property generates the way a body generates cells. He did these things alone in his own pace with a certain meditative satisfaction. He was in the equipment shed replacing a bearing in the feed grinder when he heard, faintly, coming from the direction of the east fence, the scratch of pencil on paper. He told himself he wasn't going to go look. He went to get a tool from the outside rack near the shed and happened to be facing in that direction, and so he saw Noah sitting on the top rail of the east fence, which, Eli noted automatically, was fine for the fence. The post was solid, with his sketchbook open across his knees and his pencil moving in long, careful strokes. He was drawing the ridge. Eli recognized it from even 30 yards away, the particular line of the hill to the west, the way the cedar broke the skyline, the shape of the land that he knew so completely it was like looking at a drawing of his own hand. But there was something different about it on Noah's page, something that caught from even this distance at something Eli didn't have a name for, a quality of feeling he had never thought of as being part of a landscape that he just knew as land. He went back inside the equipment shed. He did not go look at the sketchbook. He thought about going to look at the sketchbook for approximately the next 4 hours. It was Noah who eventually bridged it. That evening, sitting on the bunkhouse porch after dinner, they had both fallen into the habit of sitting out there in the last of the day's light, sometimes talking, sometimes not, a habit that had established itself without either of them nomming it. Noah set the sketchbook on the porch railing between them and opened it to the drawing of the ridge. He didn't say anything, he just set it there and looked at the sky. Eli looked at the drawing. It was better than he had expected. Not better than a drawing, better than what he had imagined feeling while looking at it. The ridge was there in all its specific detail: the cedars, the swell of the hillside, the particular jag of rock near the top that everyone who had looked at that hill for years knew without thinking. But the light was different than real light. It was the light of looking at something you love and knowing underneath the looking that you love it. There was a quality of longing in it, of held breath. "You drew the west ridge," Eli said finally. "From the east fence?" "Yeah," Noah's voice was easy. "It kept asking me to." "What does that mean?" Noah turned his head and looked at Eli, and there was something comfortable and also something curious in his expression. "It means I kept looking at it and it kept having more things in it, like it wasn't finished showing me what it was." Eli looked at the drawing again. He thought about how many thousands of times he had looked at that ridge, how it had never once occurred to him to draw it, how he had never thought of it as something that had things in it. It was just the ridge, it was just west. "You're good at this," he said. He said it simply, without the softening qualifiers people usually used when they weren't sure how much they meant something. He meant it completely, and it came out that way, and Noah went very still for just a moment, like something in him had been expecting a smaller response than that. "Thank you," Noah said quietly, like the words were worth something. They sat with that for a while. The sky went pink and orange above the ridge Noah had drawn, and the horses settled for the night in the stable, and the cicadas started their long summer conversation, and neither of them moved to go inside. Eli did not look at the sketchbook again, but he thought about it for a long time after the light was gone. The thing about slow burn things is that the burning is not slow, not exactly. What is slow is the numbing. The burning itself is constant, consistent, present in all the moments between the moments. It lives in the peripheral vision, in the sensory memory that catches, without your asking it to, the exact way a person's voice changes when they're genuinely interested in something versus when they're being polite. Eli was not a man who analyzed his own interior landscape with any particular diligence. He was a man who worked with his body and managed his feelings through motion, through the physical satisfaction of heavy work done well, through the steady rhythm of the ranch that did not leave much empty space for the kind of sitting still introspection that feelings generally require. But June was sliding toward July now, and the rhythm of the ranch had absorbed Noah Reed the way the land absorbed rain, not unchanged by it, but making room for it, letting it settle into the ground, letting the roots of existing things drink. And Eli was noticing things. He was noticing the way Noah tucked his pencil behind his ear when he was moving between tasks and forgot it was there. And you'd see him at the water trough or at the barn door with this pencil behind his ear. And it was so specific and so particularly him that Eli had stopped not noticing it and started noticing it. He was noticing the way Noah talked to the horses, not the words, there weren't always words, but the quality of his voice. The way it dropped a register, went softer, lost the little layer of social armor that voices carry when they're in conversation with other people. The horses heard the real voice, and so, from proximity, did Eli. He was noticing that when they walked the fence lines together in the morning, there was a certain distance between them, 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet, that was not awkward, not formal, just the comfortable working distance of two people who had synchronized to each other's pace, and that this distance had been, without any negotiation, arrived at. He was noticing that when he said something dry, which was most of what he said, because Eli Calloway's natural register was bone dry, Noah laughed with his whole face. Not just his mouth, not just a polite adjustment of his expression, but his eyes, the particular bright aliveness that came up in them, and sometimes he'd turn his face partly away like he was trying to contain it and then turn back, and that specific motion, the turn away and back, was somehow the worst one for Eli. The one that landed somewhere specific. He did not examine what he meant by that. He was good at not examining things. The 4th of July on the Calloway Ranch was a specific institution. The Calloways hosted a gathering, neighbors, friends, people from town, a number of ranching families who had known Raymond since before Eli was born. It involved a large fire pit, Margaret's 3 kinds of pie, a specific argument between Raymond and his neighbor Carl about water rights that had been ongoing for 11 years and showed no signs of resolution, and fireworks at the end that Eli privately considered a significant fire hazard given the dry summer grass but had long ago lost the battle of mentioning. It also, this year, involved Noah meeting the wider social world of the Calloway family, which Eli had not specifically thought about until the afternoon of the 4th, when trucks started pulling in through the gate and he registered, for the first time, that the gathering was something Noah would experience from the outside as a newcomer, as someone who didn't know these families, didn't know these people, had no history with this land. He found himself, without fully deciding to, keeping a general awareness of where Noah was in the crowd. Not hovering, not conspicuous about it, just aware, the way you might keep an ear toward something important while doing other things with your attention. Noah held his own. This was the first thing Eli noticed. He had the social ease of someone who paid genuine attention to people. He asked the right questions, remembered the answers, made the kind of eye contact that made people feel seen without making them feel examined. Eli watched Carl's wife, who was famously difficult to impress, actively seek Noah out twice in the first hour, which was more social endorsement than she had offered to anyone in recent memory. The thing that caught in Eli's chest like a burr in fabric was a man named Tyler Haskins. Tyler Haskins was 25, broad-shouldered, easy laughing, and he was the son of the Haskins family who ran a medium-sized operation about 12 miles west. He was what most people would describe as charming, which Eli had always interpreted as enthusiastic in a loud direction, and he had arrived at the gathering with his characteristic confidence and had, within 20 minutes of arrival, found his way to Noah. Eli saw it happen from across the fire pit. Tyler was leaning in to say something, close enough that the noise of the gathering required it, and Noah was listening with that quality of actual attention he brought to things, and Tyler was talking with his hands the way he always did, and he laughed at something and put his hand briefly on Noah's arm, and Noah smiled back, and Eli turned and went to get another piece of Margaret's apple pie. He was not hungry, he ate it anyway, standing at the far table with his back to the fire. He did not identify the thing in his chest as jealousy. He told himself it was just the smoke from the fire. The smoke was not coming in his direction. Later that night, when the fireworks had been fired legally, he supposed, and the gathering had wound down to the last few trucks leaving through the gate, Eli found Noah sitting at the edge of the east pasture in the dark, his sketchbook in his lap. The sky was still faintly hazy with smoke, and the stars were just beginning to reassert themselves through it, and the land was absolutely quiet in the way it gets after a crowd leaves, a particular silence that is not just the absence of noise but the active return of something. "Hiding," Eli said. Noah turned, recovering. Eli sat down on the fence rail nearby. "Not close, not far, you seemed fine out there." Performing fine is different from being fine. Eli thought about that. Fair enough. Tyler Haskins talks a lot. Something in Eli's chest went quiet in a specific way. He kept his face toward the pasture. "He does. He invited me to come see his family's operation next weekend." Eli said nothing. "I told him I'd have to see what the work schedule looked like." Eli turned to look at Noah then. He hadn't planned to. Noah was looking at him, and in the faint light, the moonlight was decent. Texas moonlight in July is a real phenomenon. There was a slight tilt to his expression, curious and also something else, something Eli's brain filed away without yet nomming. "That's up to you," Eli said. His voice came out even and flat, and that was the right voice to use. That was the correct thing to say. "I know," Noah said. He looked at Eli for 1 second longer than the conversation technically required. Then he looked back at his sketchbook, and Eli looked back at the pasture, and the stars came out one by one, and neither of them said anything for a long time, and Eli spent that time with the full weight of something he was not nomming pressing quietly against the inside of his ribs. It was an accident. That is the honest account. It was a completely honest accident, and he would have said so to anyone, and he was saying it to himself very firmly as he stood in the bunkhouse doorway on a morning in mid-July with a mug of coffee in his hand, and the clear, early morning light falling directly on the open sketchbook that Noah had left on the dresser when he went to the main house for breakfast. He was not looking at it. He was standing in the doorway. And then the page turned in a breath of cross breeze from the window and landed on the page it landed on, and Eli's eyes were already open in the direction of the dresser, and there was nothing voluntary about what happened next. He saw it the way you see something in your peripheral vision before you have the chance to look away. It was a drawing of him. He knew it was him the way you always know your own face without any particular logic. Something in the proportions, something in the set of the jaw and shoulders, something in the specific way the figure stood that was too particular to be coincidental. It was him at the fence, the east fence maybe, or the north line, somewhere he'd been, somewhere Noah had been beside him. He was not looking at the viewer in the drawing. He was looking at something in the middle distance, the way he did when he was checking the line of the fence or watching the cattle in the pasture, with that quality of focused quiet that he knew was his face's natural resting arrangement when he was thinking about something real. But the drawing, and this was the part that Eli stood with for a long moment that stretched into several long moments, the drawing had the same quality as the ridge drawing, the same light, the same held breath, the same sense of something being looked at by someone who kept finding more things in it. Eli set down his coffee. He looked at the drawing for one more second. Then he stepped back from the doorway, picked up his coffee, and walked to the stable to start the morning feed, and he did not think about the drawing for the entire time he was working, which is to say he thought about it every single moment, and the thinking was not comfortable, and the discomfort was not the bad kind, and the not bad kind of discomfort was the part that needed the most not examining. He did not tell Noah he had seen it. He did not behave differently toward Noah in any way he could identify. He was exactly as present, exactly as professional, exactly as quiet as he always was. He gave Noah the morning assignments, walked the south fence line with him, showed him the new section of the cattle guard they were putting in on the west access road. He did not look at Noah any differently. He was almost certain of that. Noah looked at him twice in the middle of the cattle guard work with a slight tilt to his expression, the curious tilt, the one Eli had cataloged by now as the one that meant Noah was registering something he wasn't sure about. But Noah said nothing, and Eli said nothing, and the cattle guard went in straight and solid by noon, and the day moved forward. That evening on the porch, Noah opened his sketchbook to a blank page and started drawing something new. Eli sat in the other chair and looked at the pasture and drank his coffee and asked himself, very carefully, a question he had been avoiding since June. The question was, what exactly is happening? The answer that came back was not a clear one. It was a feeling, or a collection of feelings, warmth and tension, and a specific kind of attention that was not like any other attention he paid to anything or anyone. It was the awareness of proximity. It was the way a conversation with Noah felt different after it was over than conversations with other people felt, fuller, somehow, or maybe just different in quality, like the difference between food that fills you and food that satisfies you, which is not always the same thing. He did not take the next step in that line of thinking. He was good at stopping at the edge of things. He had been stopping at the edge of this particular thing since he was probably 17 and hadn't had words for it, and the not having words had been, for a long time, a sufficient strategy. On the Callaway Ranch in West Texas, in the family and the community he had grown up in, certain things had not been spoken of with any ease or familiarity. This was not hostility, or at least not primarily, it was silence. The particular silence of a world that has not made room for something and therefore proceeds as though the something is not there. And in a silence like that, you learn one of two things. Either that you are not there, or that you are there but the world doesn't know it yet. Eli had spent a long time learning the first lesson. He was beginning to feel, with the uncomfortable freshness of something new and unwanted, that the first lesson might have been wrong. The storm came in the third week of July, and it was a serious one. West Texas storms are not small. They have a gravity to them, a sense of intention, the way the sky goes a particular greenish yellow in the hours before, the way the wind changes temperature and direction simultaneously, the way the cattle bunch together in the pasture with a collective instinctual knowledge that something is coming. Eli had read storms his whole life, the way anyone reads the language they were raised in. And this one had been building for 2 days. He spent the morning getting the horses in, checking all the stable latches, securing the equipment that could blow, and making sure the gate on the north pasture was properly anchored. Miguel and Denny were on the south side doing the same. Noah was with Eli, learning the storm protocol, carrying his share of the work with the solid, no-panic competence he had been developing since that first rainstorm in June. They got the last horse in, and the stable door latched down just as the sky opened. This storm was not the polite kind. This was a genuine West Texas thunderstorm in July, which involves sustained wind, sideways rain, lightning so close the thunder follows in 1 and 2 seconds rather than 10, and the particular electrical aliveness in the air that makes the hair on your arms stand up even under your shirt. They ran from the stable to the barn, which was 25 yards and felt like 60 in the rain, and got inside and pushed the heavy barn door closed against the wind and stood just inside the threshold, breathing hard. The barn was loud with the rain on the roof and the wind pushing at the walls, but it was solid, old timber, well built, 3 generations of maintenance. It held. The cattle in the south paddock had cover and the horses were in, and everything that needed to be secured had been secured. There was nothing to do but wait. Noah was drenched. Eli was drenched. They stood a few feet apart in the barn doorway, listening to the storm do its work, and the lightning came in sheets and the thunder came right behind it, and the light in the barn shifted between the ordinary dim interior and the absolute brilliant white of close lightning that turned everything to shadow and light with no middle ground. That is, Noah said after a particularly large crash of thunder, genuinely terrifying. It'll pass in an hour, Eli said. I know it can still be terrifying. You're not scared. Noah turned his head toward him, and in the next flash of lightning, Eli caught his expression, the slight amusement in it, the openness. How do you know? Your voice, Eli said before he had fully decided to say it. When people are actually scared, their voice changes. Yours didn't. Noah was quiet for a second. You pay attention to that. To voices. Yeah, but to mine specifically. The question sat in the air between them with the easy weight of something genuinely curious rather than pointed, and the rain came down on the barn roof in its full volume campaign, and Eli looked forward at the storm and his jaw worked once the way it did when he was deciding something. "I pay attention to most things," he said finally, which was not exactly what he had meant to say and not exactly evasion either. It was a truth of a slightly sideways kind. Noah let that answer sit without pushing it. That was something about Noah he didn't push. He had a quality of patience with unfinished things, with answers that didn't quite close the question that Eli had noticed early and which had made him, in some way he couldn't fully account for, trust him more rather than less. They stood in the barn doorway for another long stretch of minutes, and the storm moved and grumbled and lit up the sky. And at some point in the second half of the wait, when the lightning had backed off enough that they had stopped counting seconds, they had both drifted to sitting on the workbench along the near wall, the bench broad enough for two people comfortably, their shoulders maybe 8 inches apart. Eli was aware of the 8 inches. He was aware of them the way you are aware of a threshold, not with alarm but with the knowledge that thresholds exist for a reason and are not to be crossed carelessly. "Can I ask you something?" Noah said. "Sure." "What's it like knowing a place this well, knowing that you belong to it?" The question was so specific and so entirely unexpected that Eli turned to look at Noah before he could catch himself, and Noah was looking at him with the full directness of genuine curiosity, and they were 8 inches apart, and the storm was still going outside, and the barn was warm and loud and intimate in the way closed-in spaces become during large weather. "I don't know how to describe it," Eli said slowly. It's not mine, I belong to it, there's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Belonging to something means you have obligations, you take care of it, you don't leave when it's hard." Noah's expression did something complicated. "You've never wanted to leave." "Once," Eli said, he wasn't sure why he was saying this. "When I was 19, I had an idea about it, going somewhere else, seeing if there was more." "What happened?" "My dad got sick, I stayed. And after he got better." Eli looked at his hands. The question was exactly as precise as Noah always was when he asked something real. By then I didn't know if what I'd wanted had been about something real or just about being 19. Noah said nothing for a moment, then, "Do you know now?" The storm sent a crack of thunder directly overhead and the barn shook slightly, not structurally, just the vibration of sound through wood, and Eli felt it in his chest. And the 8 inches between them felt like something other than distance, and he looked at Noah and Noah was already looking at him, and the quality of that look was the same as the drawing. The same light, the same held breath. "Not completely," Eli said. His voice was quiet and honest, and it cost him something to say it, and Noah heard the cost, and his expression registered it with a kind of careful gentleness that was almost worse than anything else he could have done. "That's honest," Noah said softly. "I'm not good at anything else." "I know," Noah said, "I know you're not." Something passed between them in the storm-loud, rain-loud silence of the barn. Something without words, without action, without any of the gestures that mark things explicitly. But it was real. It was as real as the land outside, as solid as the 3-generation-old timber above their heads. It sat in the air between them and breathed. After a while, the storm began to move east. They sat on the workbench until it did. It started with a conversation Eli wasn't supposed to hear. He would not have heard it if he had taken the main path from the equipment shed back to the barn. He took the shortcut along the back of the equipment shed instead, the way he had 10,000 times, the worn path in the grass that cut 30 seconds off the walk, and he heard voices from the other side of the shed wall before he registered whose they were. His mother's voice and Noah's. He should have made a noise. He should have turned back or called out or done any of the several normal things a normal person does when they are about to overhear a private conversation. He did none of these things. He stood against the shed wall in the afternoon heat and heard his mother say, in the warm, clear voice she used when she was being serious without being harsh, "I'm glad you're here, Noah, I mean that, you've been good for this place." And then a pause and Noah's voice more careful, "Thank you, that means a lot." "And you've been good for Eli," his mother said, "which matters more to me." Another pause, a longer one. "I don't know if I'd say that," Noah said slowly. "He's been good for me, honestly, I'm just trying not to get in the way of anything." "You're not in the way," his mother said. "But I want to say something to you, and I want you to know I'm saying it because I trust you and because I've watched you both this whole summer and you're a good person and I can see that clearly." "Okay," Noah said quietly. "Eli has had a hard time knowing himself in certain ways," Margaret said. "He's a good man. He's honest and he's strong and he cares deeply about things, but some things he's kept too far in for too long, and I don't know what that costs a person, but I think it costs something." There was a silence. "I'm not saying anything specific," his mother continued. "I'm just saying be patient with him and don't give up on whatever this is before it has a chance to be what it might be." Eli did not hear Noah's response. He had already moved backward along the path quietly and turned toward the pasture and put as much distance between himself and that shed wall as he needed to. He went to the north pasture gate and stood with his hands on the top rail and breathed. His mother knew. His mother, who had never said a word, never asked a question, never addressed this thing that lived in Eli's chest like a sealed room, knew, and had spoken about it, to Noah, which meant she had decided after 22 years of careful silence that the thing was worth speaking about. He stood at that fence for a long time. And then something strange happened. Which was this, the sealed room that had been sealed for so long, the thing he had not examined, not named, not touched with any direct intention. It did not open. Not yet. But something shifted in it. Some small internal plate that had been held rigid by years of pressure and silence moved just slightly, the way a frozen thing moves when heat is first applied. It was not comfortable. But it was the first honest movement in a very long time. He was distant for 3 days. This was not a conscious decision. It emerged from the same mechanism that makes a person flinch from a bright light, automatic, self-protective, the old habits of management operating faster than intention. He worked alongside Noah because the ranch required it. But the 6-inch closer he had drifted over the course of the summer went back to 1.5 feet, and the evenings on the bunkhouse porch went from the companionable ease of late June to something slightly formal, slightly careful. Noah noticed? Of course he did. Noah paid attention to everything with the same quality of detailed observation that he brought to the ridge, to the horses, to the mechanics of the water trough float. He didn't push, he didn't ask. He gave Eli the space with the same patience he brought to everything, and Eli hated this slightly because space from someone you have been close to is a gift and also a confirmation. It confirmed that Noah understood that something had changed, which meant Noah had been paying enough attention to know the difference. On the third evening, sitting on the porch in the returned formality of things, Noah said, without preamble, without looking away from the sky, "You can tell me if I've done something wrong." "You haven't." "Then you can tell me that too, and I'll believe you." Eli was quiet. "I'm not going anywhere," Noah said simply. "I just want you to know that, whatever this is, I'm not going anywhere." The word whatever carried the weight of everything unsaid, and Eli felt it, and the plate in the sealed room moved again. "I know," Eli said. His voice was quieter than usual. "Okay," Noah said, "and let it be okay." It was Miguel who finally said the thing out loud, and he said it in the most Miguel way possible, which was to say he said it while doing something completely unrelated without looking at Eli, in the same tone he would have used to mention that the west water tank needed checking. They were fixing the engine on the old brush truck, a task that involved lying on your back partially under a rusted vehicle in the equipment shed on a late July afternoon, which was not a comfortable place to receive any particular kind of information. Miguel was under the truck. Eli was handing him tools. "You're making this harder than it is," Miguel said, and Eli thought he was talking about the repair. "The bracket's corroded, there's not much." "Not the truck," Miguel said. A pause. "Hand me the 1/2-inch socket." Eli handed it over. "He came back from his whole first week here and you were the first thing he told me about," Miguel said from under the truck in the same flat, informational tone. "Not the horses, not the land, you." Eli said nothing. He said he doesn't say much, but when he says something it means something. I thought that was a good way to put it. The shed was warm and smelled of oil and rust and the particular dry heat of West Texas July, and somewhere outside a hawk was making its slow circling sound. And Eli stood holding a socket wrench and felt the world doing one of its slow, large-scale adjustments, the kind you don't see happening but feel in the new quality of the ground under your feet when it's done. "Miguel." "I'm not saying anything," Miguel said pleasantly. "I'm just fixing the truck." "Right. Hand me the pliers." Eli handed him the pliers. "He's a good person," Miguel said, "the real kind." "I know," Eli said. "Okay then," Miguel said. And that was apparently the entirety of it. It happened on a Friday in the last week of July, and looking back on it later Eli would understand that it could not have happened any other way, and that everything prior to it, every fence line walked, Every stable tended, every storm weathered, every drawing seen and not spoken of had been leading here with the same patient, unhurried certainty that characterizes the movement of water toward low ground. He had gone to the ridge. Not to see Noah. He had gone because the late July sky was doing something specific, the way it does sometimes in the weeks before August, going deep rose and amber in a way that has a different quality than other sunsets, richer, somehow heavier, like the season knows it's running out of time and is putting everything it has left into the sky. He had gone to watch it the way he always went to watch it, on his own, because this was one of the things he needed to be alone with. He had reached the top of the ridge and found Noah already there. Noah was sitting on the flat section of rock at the high point, the place Eli had been sitting on his entire life. The place he thought of as specifically his in the way you think of a place as yours when you have sat in it for enough years that it carries the shape of your presence. And Noah was there, sketchbook open, drawing the sky. He looked up when Eli crested the ridge, and something moved in his face, a particular light, the same light as the drawing, the same quality of held breath and more, and then he smiled, and it was a full smile, the real one, the one with the whole face. "Hi," Noah said. "Hi," said Eli. He sat down beside him, on the rock, the flat rock that had always been his, that was now, apparently and without any formal negotiation, theirs. They watched the sky. It was extraordinary. Even by West Texas standards, which are not low, this sky was extraordinary. A full production, rose going to amber going to gold, the cedar line of the ridge catching it on its needles and holding it the way cedar does, the air carrying the smell of heat releasing from stone and the first cool thread of what would become evening. Noah was drawing it. Eli watched him for a while. The movement of his wrist, the particular quality of concentration on his face, the way he held his pencil differently than most people, higher, looser, with a delicacy of grip that suggested something not just learned but inherent. He watched Noah the way Noah had drawn the ridge, finding more things in it. And then Noah turned from the page to look at the sky, and Eli was already looking at Noah, and their eyes met. And the proximity on the flat rock was what it was: close, real, present, and neither of them looked away. "I saw the drawing," Eli said. Noah's expression didn't change, he was very still. "The one of me in the bunkhouse, it was an accident." The page turned and "It's okay," Noah said quietly. "I should have told you sooner." "It's okay, Eli." The sky went on being extraordinary, neither of them moved. "Why'd you draw me?" Eli said. Noah looked at him for a long moment, and in the quality of that look was everything that had been building since June, every morning on the porch, every fence line, every 8-inch gap in the storm, every turn away and back when Eli said something dry and Noah tried to contain the laugh. All of it was there, and it was not hidden, and Noah was not trying to hide it. "Because I keep finding more things in you," Noah said simply. The words were the same ones he had used for the ridge. It kept having more things in it, used now deliberately as a direct translation, and Eli heard it that way and felt it go through him, like not like anything bad, like the first cup of coffee in the morning, like the particular quality of air just after a storm has passed, like something the body recognizes as right before the mind has finished reading it. "Noah," he said, his voice was different, not flat, not managed, not the careful, even surface he had been maintaining since he was old enough to know he needed one. "I need you to know something." "Okay." "I'm not good at this," Eli said. "Not at this. I don't have practice at saying things. I've been not saying things for a very long time, and I'm aware that doesn't make sense to most people, but it's the truth, and I'd rather you know the truth than think I'm something other than what I am." Noah's expression was open and careful and completely attentive. "I know you're not good at it," Noah said softly. "You've been getting better at it all summer." Eli looked at him. "Have I?" "Every conversation on the porch," Noah said. "Every morning you handed me a coffee. Every time you stopped at a fence and told me something true about this place." "Yeah." Eli was quiet for a moment. "The way you look at this place," he said finally. "The way you drew it, the way you look at everything, I've never—" He stopped, tried again. "I've been here my whole life and I've never seen anyone see it the way you do, and I've been—" He stopped again. The sky was extraordinary, and the cedar was gold, and the air had that quality, and he was on the rock he'd always thought of as his, and Noah was beside him, and the sealed room was quietly opening. "You've been," Noah prompted, so gently. "I've been trying to figure out how to talk about what I feel," Eli said, "for a while now, and I'm not there yet, but I wanted you to know I'm trying." Noah was quiet for a moment that was not empty but full. "That's enough," Noah said. "Eli, that's more than enough." He did not reach for Eli's hand. He did not move closer. He sat with the fullness of what had just been offered and held it with both hands and did not drop it, and Eli, who had been preparing for the weight of it to be too much for someone to hold, felt something in his chest go so deeply quiet that it was almost like the quiet that comes after a long time of noise. The good quiet, the right quiet. The first place the quiet made sense, Eli said. Noah turned to look at him. That's what you said, Eli continued, on that first night about why you'd never gotten the ranch out of your head. Yeah, Noah said softly. I've been thinking about that since you said it. What have you been thinking? Eli looked at him. The sky was going deep now, amber turning toward red, and Noah's face in it was warm and close, and the expression on it was everything. That I hope the ranch isn't the only reason you stayed. Noah looked at Eli for one long, complete moment. And then very quietly he said, it isn't. That night they walked back from the ridge in the early dark, side by side on the trail through the cedar, and the distance between them was different from every distance there had been all summer. Not smaller necessarily, they still walked without touching, because they were both people who moved carefully into things but different in quality. The way a silence that both people are choosing is different from a silence that is just the absence of speech. When they reached the bunkhouse porch, Eli sat in his chair and Noah sat in his chair, and Eli said, I don't know how to do this. Do what? Any of it. Noah was quiet for a moment, then, I don't either completely, but I know that I'm not scared of the not knowing, not here. Here, Eli repeated. With you, Noah clarified, simply. They sat on the porch for a long time. The ranch settled into full night around them, the horses moving softly in the stable, the cattle quiet in the south pasture, the mockingbirds giving way to the night sounds, crickets and cicadas, and the far-off conversation of two coyotes somewhere north of the ridge. The stars came up one by one and then in quantities, the way they do in West Texas where the sky is wide and there is no city light to compete with, filling the dark from horizon to horizon until it felt almost too much, like something that shouldn't be real but was. At some point, Eli could not have said precisely when Noah put his sketchbook down on the railing and reached over and very lightly, very briefly, laid his hand over Eli's where it rested on the arm of the chair. Not a grip, not a hold, just a presence. A contact, the simplest, most honest gesture that one person can make toward another. I am here and I know you are here and I am glad. Eli turned his hand over and held on. August arrived with the certainty and heat of all August things, and the ranch moved forward in its rhythm, and Eli and Noah moved through it together in a way that was different from June and different from July and different from every other summer this ranch had ever known. The difference was not dramatic. It did not announce itself. It lived in the same places everything real lives, in the small things, in the consistency of small things, in the accumulated weight of many small things that, taken together, make something that has no individual name but cannot be mistaken for nothing. It lived in the way Eli walked the fence line in the morning now, still beside Noah, still at that same foot-and-a-half working distance, but with an ease in it that had not been there in June. The managed stillness in his shoulders was gone. He walked like a man who was walking beside someone rather than a man who was walking beside someone and managing the fact of it. It lived in the way Noah talked to him now. Still the same thoughtful attention, still the same genuine questions, but without the layer of uncertainty that had been in his voice sometimes in those early weeks, the slight delicacy of someone who is not sure how much of themselves is welcome. That was gone. He spoke with the full weight of himself, the way you do when you are not adjusting your size for the space. It lived in the sketchbook, which Noah still left on the dresser and which now contained, Eli had seen not by accident this time but by direct offer, Noah turning the book toward him one evening on the porch, not just the ridge and the drawing of Eli at the fence but a whole summer of the ranch seen through Noah's eyes. The water trough in morning light, the stable in the bluish hour before dawn, the east pasture with the clouds coming over. Juniper's face in close detail, one eye and the line of her jaw and the soft hair at her temple. A drawing of two chairs on a porch, both occupied, both figures looking at the same sky. Eli had held that one for a long time. It's good, he'd said, which was still his best vocabulary for certain things, and Noah had known exactly what he meant. It was in the second week of August that the conversation they had been circling for 3 months happened in its full form. It happened after a long day, the good kind of long, the productive kind, the kind that settles in your muscles as satisfaction rather than strain. They had moved the main herd to the north pasture, mended 3 sections of fence, helped Miguel with a mechanical problem on the tractor, and got the evening water done before the heat peaked. Eli's father had said at dinner, in his particular low economy of words, "Good work today." Which, in Raymond Calloway's personal language, was something close to extravagant praise. After dinner, they were on the porch and the sky was doing its late summer thing, the particular orange of early August evenings, richer than June, more urgent somehow, the light of a season that knows it is ending, and Noah said, "I go back in 3 weeks." Eli had known this. He had always known this. The program end date was August 31st, and he had noted it in his mind in early June the way you note an unpleasant future fact and then do not look at it directly again until it becomes unavoidable. Now it was unavoidable. "Yeah," Eli said. "I've been thinking about what that means," Noah said. He was not looking at the sky, he was looking at Eli. Eli looked at him. "What does it mean?" "That depends on what this is," Noah said, simply, directly, with all of his characteristic not flinching from the real thing. "I think I know what it is for me, but I don't know what it is for you." This was the fair question. This was the only honest question, and Eli had known it would come, and he had been not preparing exactly because preparation implies a confidence he hadn't had, but moving toward it, walking the long fence line of himself toward the place where the gate was. "I'm not good at saying things," Eli said. "I know you've said that before." "I'm still not." "I know that too. But I'll try." Noah waited. He was very good at waiting. Eli looked at his hands, then at the ridge in the dying light, then at Noah. And he said in the flattest, most stripped down, most Eli Calloway way possible, "You changed something." Noah's expression did not change, it just went very still. "I don't know exactly what to call it," Eli continued. "I've spent a long time not knowing what to call things, but I know that what I feel when you're here is different from everything else. And I know that the idea of you not being here it's not okay, it's not something I'm okay with." He stopped, his jaw tightened once, that telltale movement. "I don't know what that looks like practically," he said. "I don't know how this works, I don't have a model for it, but I know it's real, I know you're real to me." The sky was very orange, the mockingbird started its evening catalog, the horses shifted in the stable. Noah reached across the space between their chairs and took Eli's hand. "I know," Noah said, "I know you're real to me too." And he said, "I'm not going to disappear, I'm going back to Austin for the semester, but I'm coming back. I want to come back if you want me to." "Yeah," Eli said, his voice was not flat now, it was low and quiet and full. "I want you to." Then it settled. "Just like that." "Just like that," Noah said. And the smile came up, the full one, the whole face one, and Eli, who had been studying that smile all summer, who knew its every variation by now, felt it do what it always did, which was to make the world marginally but measurably better. He didn't look away from it this time. There is an old belief, among people who have spent their lives around horses, that animals perceive things in the emotional register that humans try to hide. Not superstition, exactly, more the accumulated observation of generations of people watching animals read the truth of a room while humans read its performance. Juniper knew something had changed before dinner that evening. Eli was in the stable doing the night check, water levels, hay latches, when Juniper pressed her forehead against his chest the way she sometimes did, which was a gesture she made to approximately 3 people in the world and which each of those 3 understood as a specific communication. He put his hand on the side of her neck the way you do, and she breathed, slow and warm, and he stood with her in the stable that smelled of hay and horse and cedar and the particular end-of-day quality of a summer that was running toward its close. Noah appeared in the stable doorway. Juniper turned her head, saw him, and did something she had never done before in Eli's witnessing, which was to make the specific low sound of welcome, the nicker of recognition and pleasure, that she reserved for the people she knew and chose. Noah came to her the way he always did, slowly and without performance, and she pressed her nose against his shoulder and he held the side of her face with both hands and looked at Eli over her neck. And the look was all of it, the summer, the ridge, the storm, the drawings, the porch, the hands, all of it in one long look in the warm, stable light. "She knows," Noah said. "She always knows," Eli said. The last 2 weeks of August had a quality that Eli had never experienced in a summer before, which was the quality of something being simultaneously more itself and in the process of changing. The ranch was more fully the ranch, somehow more vivid, more present, more weighted with its own meaning, and at the same time it was the thing that was about to become a memory, to become the place someone was away from and coming back to rather than simply the place. They worked hard those 2 weeks. The end of summer had its own pace, cattle to be moved, equipment to be winterized in anticipation, the north fence to be gone over before the harder weather came. But the work had a different texture now, the way work does when it is shared by people who have chosen each other's company, who bring their whole selves rather than just their hands to the same labor. Eli's mother said nothing specific, but she started making coffee in slightly larger quantities, and she added a second chair to the end of the big table, and she found on a Sunday that she needed Noah's opinion on the East Garden, which was a project she had been managing alone for 15 years, and whatever was said between them in the garden that afternoon, Noah came back from it with something calm and settled in his expression. Raymond Calloway said nothing to Noah directly, but on the second to last day he took them both out to the far corner of the north pasture, a place Eli had been going with his father since he was old enough to sit on the fence, and he told them the history of it, the original boundary markers, the year his grandfather had built the north fence and what it had cost. The story of the spring that had run in the low corner until the drought of '79 and how the land had remembered it, and how even now in a wet year the grass came in greener there. He told it like a man who was telling the whole story, not just the parts that were his. Eli watched his father tell it and looked at Noah listening and felt something open in him that had been sealed for a very long time, and it did not hurt, and it was not frightening, and the land was there under his feet the way it always was, familiar and absolute and real. The last evening came the way last evenings always do, with the full weight of everything that led to it, and with the specific cruelty of ordinary beauty deciding to be extraordinary exactly when you have to leave. The sky that final August evening was the kind that would have made Noah reach for his sketchbook at any other point in the summer, but he did not reach for it. He sat on the bunkhouse porch with Eli and let the sky be what it was without drawing it, which was its own kind of attention. The bags were packed. The truck to town was at 7 the next morning. Everything was arranged and documented, and the practical world had done what the practical world does, which is to keep moving with its requirements regardless of what is happening in the emotional landscape of the people navigating it. They sat in their chairs, the chairs that had been theirs all summer, the chairs whose specific boards had the specific shapes of where they sat, and the sky went its slow route from gold to rose to the first deep blue of coming night, and the mockingbird sang and the horses settled and the stars began. "I'll be back in October," Noah said, "when the program break is." "October," Eli said. "6 weeks. I know. I'll call." "Good." Noah turned to look at him. "You'll answer." Eli looked at him, and the expression on his face, which was not flat, which had not been flat in some time, which had been quietly, slowly over the course of one long West Texas summer, learning the language of itself, was full. "I'll answer every one." Noah held his gaze for a long moment, and then he stood and Eli stood, and the space between them was what it was, and they were two people who had spent a summer learning each other with a completeness that does not require dramatic gestures to be real. Eli reached out and put both hands on Noah's face, not romantic in the movie sense, just honest, the gesture of someone who has never known quite how to say things and has found, finally, a language his hands speak better than his mouth, and he looked at him, steady and close and present. "Thank you," Eli said. "For what?" "For coming here, for staying, for seeing the things you saw." Noah's hands came up to rest on Eli's arms, and his eyes were warm and the color of held light, and the night was coming down around them, and the ranch breathed its slow breath, 460 acres of red dirt West Texas land that belonged to nobody and held everybody who loved it in its patient keeping. "Thank you for letting me," Noah said. And the night came, and the stars were full and broad and impossible, and the bunkhouse porch held them in its particular quiet, and the story of that summer settled into the land the way all true things settle, not as endings but as foundations. Epilogue, October. He came back in October. The truck came through the gate on a Thursday evening, which was the same day of the week he had first arrived, and Eli was at the fence near the main drive, not because of any coincidence. He had put himself there deliberately, working a section of wire that did not particularly need attention, when the headlights came up the drive. He heard the truck door open, he heard boots hit gravel. He did not tell himself he was not going to look up. He looked up. Noah Reed stood in the October evening light, cooler now, the land starting its autumn turn, the cedar going darker, the grass shifting to the gold of the season that was coming, with his duffel bag over one shoulder and his sketchbook under his arm. And he was looking at Eli with the full directness of someone who has been somewhere else for 6 weeks, and who is exactly where they want to be now. Eli Calloway, who was not generally a man who demonstrated things, dropped the fence tool, walked across the drive, and closed the 12 yards between them in 8 steps, And the greeting that happened was not composed, and it was not flat, and it was not the managed surface that had been his habitual protection for most of his adult life. It was full, it was honest. It was warm the way the land is warm after a long rain, the kind of warmth that goes all the way down. And from the porch of the main house, Margaret Calloway watched and said nothing, but her expression was the expression of a woman whose careful, patient work has come to its right conclusion. And Juniper in the near stable made her small sound of recognition and went back to her hay. And the Calloway Ranch, 460 acres of red dirt West Texas land, breathed in and held what it held. There is a particular kind of love that does not arrive in a rush. It arrives the way the land changes seasons, not in a single moment but in 1,000 small moments, each one barely distinguishable from the last. Until one day you look up and the light is different and the air is different and everything is in the process of becoming what it was always going to be. Eli Calloway, who was not good at saying things, would spend the rest of his life learning to say them. Noah Reed, who had spent his whole life looking for the place where the quiet made sense, had found it. Not in a landscape. In a person. In the particular quiet of standing beside someone who lets you see them. That is the whole story. That is the only story.
The end. If this story made you feel something tonight, if you found yourself holding your breath on the ridge, leaning in during that thunderstorm, or feeling the warmth of that October evening, then you are ready now that love does not need drama to be powerful. Sometimes the most profound stories happen in the quietest places between two people who are simply finally brave enough to be seen. This story is for everyone who has ever loved quietly, carried something long and alone, and waited for the right person to make the silence make sense. If Eli and Noah If Eli and Noah's story moved you, please like this video and let us know in the comments. Your support means everything and helps more people find this community. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story from Cowboy Secrets. Every day, every week, we bring you emotional, cinematic stories of love, identity, and the beautiful courage it takes to be known. Leave a comment and thanks for watching and keep watching.